thank you very much for letting me do this. It's a little bit of an indulgence to have me come and speak, and I appreciate it. However, I hadn't realized just how amazing you all are as speakers, and so if I ever get to do this again, I'm going first. So my story is a story of getting sick, and it's not the first yarn that's ever had to do with illness. It's got a part before getting sick and a part after getting sick. And if I can ask one more indulgence of you, you know, about half of my life was lived in Philadelphia before having the chance to come back to MIT, and much of this story happens in Philadelphia. It just does. So thanks for letting that be true. So the before getting sick part. I was born in a small town in western Massachusetts. My parents didn't have very much money. My dad built most of our house. We were a Roman Catholic family. My parents just kept having kids. I was the oldest. Boom, 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 boom. After there were 6 of them in 7 years, the local parish priest came by and told my parents that he had been in touch with the bishop, who had been in touch with Rome, and it's okay to do whatever you need to do. You cannot afford more children. So they stopped at 6. I was the oldest. I was expected to make the family's fortune, to to be the initial fulfillment or the next fulfillment of the American dream for them. They noticed that I was good in school, that I read a lot of books, and so their goal was that I would be the first in our family to go to college, and that I would be a librarian because I was reading a lot of books. Obviously, I liked books, and you'll always need books. Books are never going to go away. There will always be libraries. And so their great hope is that I would go to a college that had a good library science program. I was admitted to Brown University as an undergrad, and I told them that it had a library science program, although it actually did. So I studied mathematics, and I went to graduate school, and I went ultimately for a PhD in business. And I went to Philadelphia, and I taught at the Wharton School. I started there when I was 25 years old, when the average age of MBA students was 28. And I taught marketing to MBAs, having never been a marketing manager when I was 25. That didn't go that well. I got better at it. But I was very successful in the ways that assistant professors tend to be evaluated. I had lots and lots of papers published. They were on what were considered the themes of, that were emerging at that time. In my discipline, that was supermarket scanner data and forecasting and so on. I was a good mathematician, and I was inordinately focused. I was respected by my colleagues. Certainly by some of my peers, I was feared, and I wasn't really very much liked. I wasn't disliked, but I didn't go out of my way to be liked. I was doing what I needed to do, which was to make that straight line go in that straight line direction, and with teaching too. So after about 7 years, as you may know, you would be considered for tenure. In my 5th year, I got sick, and it happened in June. By July, I couldn't get out of bed. By August, I still couldn't get out of bed, and I called the head of my department and said that I wouldn't be able to teach in the fall, and that he was going to have to put me on disability. And he said, "We're not going to do that. There's a number of reasons that are bad economically if that happens. But your colleagues are going to take over your classes for the fall." And I couldn't believe that people would do that for me. In part probably because I wasn't sure if I would do it for them. But they did, and As the fall went on, my parents took a leave from their jobs and they came to Philadelphia and they took care of me. I still wasn't getting better. My dissertation advisor wrote a note to one of our friends telling this friend that he thought that I wasn't going to live. And then it was actually the point I got really afraid because I thought he knew a lot more about things than I did. It was a virus, Epstein-Barr maybe. I had liver function abnormalities. I continued to have those symptoms for actually about 15 years. And but after about 8 or 9 months, it stopped getting worse and it started getting a little bit better, month by month. And so in the spring, I still couldn't teach, and I called my department head again, and I said, you have to put me on long-term disability. And he said, we're not going to do it. And again, my colleagues taught my classes for me. And by the end of the spring semester, I was actually able to get out of bed for 2 or 3 hours a day at a time. And so I came into the office and I would come and co-teach a class or make an appearance in a class at least, and was on a very slow road to getting better. But you know, some people talk about the negotiation that you do with yourself, with God, with the spirits. So I agreed to give away about 2/3 of my lifetime earnings if I could get better, and you know, a number of other things, including, of course, that I would change my life. A lot of that stuff, like New Year's resolutions, doesn't actually pan out once you do start to get better. Maybe it helped in my case that it took about 15 years for me to fully recover. But I did actually change in some ways. And there were 3 things that I found myself doing afterward that I wasn't doing before. One, because I didn't think I was actually likely to live all that long. And the forecast was, and to some degree still is, that there's a finite limit here. And so one thing that I was going to do is work on stuff that I cared about, not stuff that other people expected me to work on. And so I changed the research that I did. Second, I just felt much more at ease if I told the truth all the time. And I just decided that I would do that and it would be okay whatever happened, because who cares anymore? And third, is that I would try to bring my whole person to each thing that I did, and let that be good or bad, but just let it happen. And this is not to say that I actually did all of those things every single day, but when I did come back to the office, there was a guy who was really a bully in the marketing group at Wharton, and he told me that everyone was against me, but he was the one who spoke up for my reappointment, and he would expect my support in future, sort of meetings. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And I went to the department head and I said, this is what this guy said. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to do this. I might, belong to somebody, but I'm not going to belong to him. And I felt, okay, that's it. I'm going to be all finished in this group, because he's a really powerful person. In fact, he had irritated other people also. And 2 years later, a year later, while I was still mostly horizontal rather than vertical, my colleagues put me up for tenure, which is ridiculous. And then the year after that, they made me head of the department because they trusted who I was, not because they thought I was the smartest person. And again, I thought what I would do would be to get myself fired by trying to change what I thought was most wrong with the group, which is the way that younger faculty were treated. And so I just set about turning that upside down, and it turned out that everybody thought that it was overdue to do that. And so instead of getting fired, I actually came to the attention of the dean, who asked me to serve on some committee that he was putting together to look at online learning. And during the consideration of that online learning program at Wharton, all the faculty thought this was the stupidest idea they ever heard. We'll get sued. We don't know anything about publishing online, ... And I was the one person who said, honestly, here's what I truly believe. I think we have to do this. I think we'll learn something. We could screw up, but we should be doing something that's worthwhile, and this is that. And people said, no, that's stupid. And that night, the dean asked me to serve as his deputy dean. And so for the next 7 years, I served this guy, whose name is Pat Harper, as his deputy dean, and tried to tell the faculty who I was supposed to manage the truth, whatever the truth was. By the time Pat was ready to step down as dean, MIT was looking for a dean, and so was the Wharton School, because my boss was leaving. I knew that the faculty and the alumni wanted me to serve as the dean of the Wharton School, and I felt, this was, I had learned something important, and that is that if you tell the truth, if you just bring your whole person, if you let everything go where it does, it'll all work out. Somehow it really will work out. And so I went to see the president of the University of Pennsylvania. In the final interview process, Wharton's search process for dean was a little bit ahead of MIT's search process in time. That was going to be a problem. I wasn't going to get to consider both opportunities. My colleagues wanted me to serve as dean at Wharton, and I felt that I would. And I knew that the president had insisted on there being 3 candidates, and I knew that the search committee had told her, I'm going to give you 3 names, but there's only 1 candidate. And so she and I started to talk, and I was jabbering about all my great ideas for the school and so on. And she said, that's great, I'm really excited, I know you've got a lot of support and so on. I just want to make, sort of mention one thing, and that is that what I'm going to do, and with your help and support and so on, is I'm going to change the way that the alumni fundraising works at Wharton. And instead of the fundraising for Wharton alums going to Wharton, I'm going to make those alumni report to the university. And of course, you'll still get some of the support, but I think it's time to make that change. And that was the one thing that I knew that would cause a revolt among the alums and among the faculty, and I couldn't say yes to it. And so I said, let me help you with this. This is going to be a big mistake. Here's what you really want to do. Here's how you want to do it, and so on. And her eyes got really narrow, and she leaned back in the seat and said, okay, let's talk about something else. And I knew I wasn't going to be the dean of the Wharton School. And I thought, man, this whole telling the truth thing and being a whole person, it works a lot of the time, but it doesn't work all the time. So the word came out pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be the dean, and some of the sense of why that was. The next day I had to appear before a group of about 200 staff in the school, and I was saying goodbye to someone who was leaving, and so I was introducing them. When I came up to introduce them, the 200 staff stood up, and they started applauding, and they wouldn't stop. I mean, that was worth not being the dean all by itself. The other thing, though, that I knew I needed to do, and it was going to be hard, is that I had to call my friend, who was a faculty member at MIT, who was managing the relationship with me during MIT's search for a dean. And I needed to tell her that I wasn't going to be a viable candidate for MIT's deanship either, because the symbolism of these things is really important. And it was going to become public that I had been passed over for the Wharton deanship before MIT came to the closure of its process. So I called and I said, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be able to serve as dean, this is what's happened. And she said, I don't understand what you're saying. I said, you can't appoint someone who's been passed over by the president of the University of Pennsylvania for the Wharton School. And she said, I don't think you know very much about MIT, actually. None of us care what the University of Pennsylvania is. So actually, I think maybe telling the truth and doing what you love and bringing your whole person, it maybe works out after all.